This is somebody protesting what is happening in Gaza, what the Israeli government is doing in Gaza, targeting individuals marching for hostages in Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah. You know, I don't think it's about geopolitics. I think it's about whether we still believe that Jews have the right to be safe at our synagogues, at peaceful protests, in diaspora communities, thousands of miles away from Gaza. And I think what is important to say right now is that anti-Jewish hate and violence are unacceptable. I think you, Katie, have done that and shown moral clarity in your show. And I really hope more of your colleagues will do this, because I've never had the illusion that the far right is on our side. Their hatred doesn't surprise us. And that's why hearing President Trump making a statement today and using this horrific attack on American Jews to fan the flame of hostility towards immigrants is truly sickening. He didn't use the word anti-Semitism once in his statement. But
again, the assumption here, as with every report from a corporation like MSNBC, is that the Palestinian people do not have a right to be a victim. Their victimhood is denied. Their humanity is denied. Even their representation in the narrative is denied. They are not factored in. This goes back to the inception of the Balfour Declaration. They're always described by what they're not. They're not Jewish. They're not victims. Of course, we're going to hear from corporate media that the outrage here, it's not the genocide. It's the fact that Trump is blaming this attack on Biden and his border policy. That's just despicable.
The silence or worse that we feel, or the justification from some part of the progressive left, the political home of most Jews, including myself, cuts much deeper. And that silence is felt acutely because we've stood shoulder to shoulder in every fight for justice. And now we're asking, will you show up for us?
Well, let's talk about the discomfort there, because there are a lot of folks who are looking at what's happening in Gaza, especially what's been happening the last few days. And they're saying to themselves, Hen, that this is really tough. I mean, they're using stronger language than that. It's sickening.
Yeah, I can't really say too much more than that. It's really tough.
It's horrible. I can't believe that this is still happening. I can't believe that America is involved with this. And that discomfort, that anger, it comes in the form of an outlet where they express themselves on social media. And they feel like they need to express themselves. They've got to get it out there because they're not going to stand by what's happening. How do you speak to that? And also speak to what we saw yesterday, what we saw 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., and what you say Jews are feeling.
Yeah, what you say, whatever you say over there, bozo.
All around the country, right?
I think that a lot of us are feeling this pain. You know, the hostage families in Israel have been...
Yes, oh yes, of course. They invoke hostages. Why? How did we not see this? The sausages, yes. What could be the reason? As Tom York said, what could be the reason for the sausages? Where for out our sausages, though?
In one of the most outspoken parts of Israeli society, calling to end the war. They want their family members back. And this rally was about the hostages, and it was for peace. And I think that empathy doesn't require agreement with the Israeli government's policy. In fact, you can condemn it and you can criticize the Israeli government.
Are we talking to Tom York here? Israeli activist. Tom York, thank you. This is exactly what Tom York said. We can criticize Netanyahu, but condemn Hamas. Sausages. Yisrael Chai. Stop noticing.
Many of us Jews oppose their actions today. I think...
No, actually, I don't think so. I think there was a recent poll that just was released by Penn State University that proved that 82% of Jewish Israelis support the full ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip, and a majority of them think that Amalek is a relevant idea and concept and a genuine fear that should be eradicated in our current world. So it seems as though the overwhelming majority of the Israeli public loves the Jews. I'm going to go ahead and call bullshit.
Unity is being targeted with violence and hate. We have to be honest and say that digital rhetoric radicalizes people and false narratives.
You know what radicalizes people, Shlomo? Being occupied and being annihilated systematically with a savage, high-tech, murderous, remote-controlled bombing campaign. That radicalizes you, okay? Try having your families at 5 a.m. from an Israeli Javelin missile that was fired because your dad was targeted through an AI list. You spineless turd.
Like the one we heard that 14,000 babies will die in 48 hours last week. They're not just misinformation, they become fuel. And
yeah, not that many babies were going to die Okay, it wasn't 14,000. Yes, we've maybe 50,000 children so far, but please, stop with the misinformation. It wasn't 14,000 babies, it was 13,000. I cannot believe this schmuck is saying, please, the biggest problem here is the misinformation concerning the numbers of the dead that we are accruing as a result of the worst crime against humanity that you can possibly think of. The systematic annihilation of an entire civilization.
To be very mindful in the way that we discuss these issues.
God, I hate liberals. God, I hate them.
You know, slogans like globalize the intifada or end Zionist.
Yes, that's the real problem. Globalize the enchilada. Please stop saying it. It hurts my feelings. And Yisrael Chai, my feelings are more important than your babies.
Which is what the attacker said. They're not abstract slogans. They are part of a feedback loop that turns digital incitement into real-world violence. And there's a dangerous trend of accepting what Hamas is saying and their statements and then just without verifying. And, we are the ones that are paying the price. So I'm saying we can't criticize. We should show empathy to the Jewish community, and we should be just very vigilant with how we're using our words.
Did he say the word Palestine or Gaza once? Did he say the Palestinians? Did he recognize that an entire country of sovereign people are being annihilated one time in that answer? Also, what's up with the chopped broccoli haircut?
So how do you define anti-Semitism online? What is the line? Where is the line when it is crossed? When it becomes not just voicing criticism, but then becomes anti-Semitic and becomes potentially inspiring for hate that spills out into the real world in acts of violence?
Right, exactly. I mean, anti-Semitism doesn't need a swastika to be deadly. It adapts, it evolves. And
We include everything to be anti-Semitism. So glad you asked that question, Katie, because anti-Semitism is actually a lot more than you just think it is, okay? Thank you. I will now center myself as the victim of everything.
Language, and we hear from people using academic jargons and present itself as if they're calling for justice while saying things like, globalize the intifada, which is about violence, or
globalize the intifada, but Israel has the right to defend itself is not about violence. This is what another case of, liberals pearl clutching at words while tacitly supporting and normalizing the worst of actions. Yes, another example of pearl clutching at words, but tacitly supporting and normalizing crimes against humanity, the very thing that they are so upset about in the words that people are using, which aren't even inherently violent. Globalize the intifada is not inherently violent. And you know what? Who would agree with me? Israel's own foreign minister, Shlomo ben Ami, who recognized that the intifada, the second intifada specifically, when he was acting as the minister, that it was a authentic Palestinian struggle for self-determination, and it began peacefully. And it only escalated into a war when the IDF started machine gunning citizens, civilians, Palestinians. So once again, we can just call to mind the many plethora of quotes that Israeli officials have uttered over the years to disprove what this silly little Zionist wants to get us to believe, which is that the intifada must be violent. No, the intifada is a peaceful protest that turns violent when the occupation forces escalate. You see, there's one side in this conflict that has a monopoly on violence, and that is Israel. Why would Israel not want to play that game? Of course they'd want to advance violence. That's the one thing that they excel and can dominate their enemy with. They can't use the truth. They don't own the truth. They don't own honesty. So, of course, they're going to want to use violence. They always sought to divide and conquer the Gaza Strip from the West Bank, and even the Gaza Strip within itself. It's the entire idea, and so it's always been thought of as an important success in Israel's foreign policy that they have been able to have a separate administration that administers the Gaza Strip from the West Bank. That was one of their big goals, and they were able to achieve that. And think about how successful that is in breaking up national unity. You physically broke up the territory, but you also culturally broke up the territory, economically and politically. That's a huge success in further busting up the territory into smaller and smaller cantons that you can occupy over time.
And Zionist, that's what he said when he was throwing Molotov cocktails on an 88-year-old Holocaust survival. You can care deeply about Palestinian rights. I know I do, and you should demand.
Yeah, 4 minutes and 30 seconds in, you actually mention the people, finally.
Justice for civilians in Israel and in Gaza. I know I have, and I continue to do that. But turning Jews into targets for violence doesn't help Palestinians. If you care about Palestinian lives, don't let this cause be hijacked by hatred. It doesn't just harm Jews, it undermines the cause itself.
It's not that Israel needs to change anything. The real problem is the protestation of the genocide. You know, those people, they should really tone it down, all right? This is another, like, siding with power, you know? Just side with whoever's in charge.
And what really troubles me is that Palestinians are out in the Gaza Strip protesting against Hamas, and it just doesn't look like Western activists actually care about them when they protest in support of Hamas.
Yes, even the people that we are bombing, some of them, they don't like Hamas, and you don't recognize this. How do you not stand with the Palestinians? Even they don't like Hamas. We will never forgive you for making us their children. It's really your fault. Okay, we bomb them because we love them. We actually care.
At the exact same time, these narratives that cast Jews as inhumane enemy lead to very inhumane results.